The men in a Pickmesha's life are quite literally the worst. In fact, are 99% of your problems as her friend. Because unless they can get something from you, they will have no use for you and will try to turn their Pickmesha woman against you. Here's an example. I had a friend who had a very controlling, domineering husband, which in many cases, this is the hallmark of a Pickmesha. They will attract men who are only concerned with power and control. We were all out at a dinner and he, out of nowhere, started to attack me for my political beliefs, which we weren't even talking politics because I don't talk politics with dinner. We were all just having a good time, but he had somehow seen my political beliefs at one point on a social media page and held on to that resentment and anger over my intelligence and my forthrightness in expressing those beliefs. And he had built resentment. In reality, he was threatened because of that intelligence and that power to speech. And so he used an opportunity where we were all out at a social gathering to quite literally attack me and try to humiliate me. Now, why would he do that? Because in his mind, the relationship that I had with his woman threatened his power and dominion in her life. Because if she had a best friend who was so intelligent and forthright about her political persuasions, what would that do for him when he acted out of pocket and I was advising her on how to deal with him? It would conflict or threaten his sense of dominance and control. And so he used a social opportunity in front of a lot of people to put me in my place and to make me, in his mind, look foolish in the eyes of his woman so that he could maintain power and control. Another example of this is I had a Pickmesha friend whose fiance would pick up and sexually exploit all of the women in her life. He would try to exploit me in that way, and I would never allow him to. And I stayed quiet about the abuse he was inflicting on our female friends in the group because I wasn't quite adept to what was happening. And I was also myself a Pickmesha. And so he would get in her ear and just talk about me and talk about how I was a man hater and about how I wasn't open-minded and I just was this single spinster. Really, I wasn't centering men, and I was making videos like this, and they were secretly watching from afar. And then he would spin my videos and my stance on decentering men as me being a man hater and that I was going to die alone and be alone forever. So he was telling her these things in private, which slowly eroded our friendship and eroded her sense of affection for me. And she started to act out of pocket and passive aggressive because of the things that her man was saying to her behind closed doors. And we maintained the friendship as long as we could. And then we all went out together one night and he essayed me while we were at this club, which I've made a video about in my library. So go back and watch it. But he essayed me in a club because his only way of maintaining dominance, power, and control was to spin the narrative of me being a strong woman as me having less value because I didn't center men, and explaining that I was going to die alone to her because I was impossible or unhinged or whatever, communicating to her that if she did the same thing, decentering him, she would have the same fate. And when that didn't work to silence me and to dissuade her from being friends with me, he essayed me in a club to try to maintain his dominance and power and control. And she knew it was happening and she made excuses for him. Needless to say, that friendship ended because he eventually got into her head so much that I was the problem and that I was somebody to be feared and that I was unhinged, that she took herself out of my life, of course, blaming me. Because many times these women that are Pickmeshas will utilize the same toxic strategies that the men in their lives have always utilized, which is blame shifting, projecting, and gaslighting. And that's exactly what she did. And unfortunately, this is the fate of many women that decenter men that have Pickmesha friends. They will be discarded by those friends. They will be made out to be the aggressor or the one that ended the friendship, when in reality it was Pickmesha women with aggressive, domineering men in their ears, looking at these friends that have decentered men as a threat to their power and their dominion, and then getting in the ears of those women to turn their backs on female friendships that would threaten that paradigm of submission from their women with both opinions and their example of decentering men.